He won't help you here.
What's up, Goth Gamer Nation? The end is coming. The end of the long wait between video game content videos. Rest assured, I'm working on a video about the Chronicles of Riddick game series. However, in the meantime, a few channels have released content about said games, which is not ideal. I think I can make it worth your while, if anything, through the sheer runtime of it all. I got a few tricks up my sleeve. I'm not going down without cowering and screaming. If, however, you support me on Patreon for as little as a single $1 American, I recently made available a 2-hour retrospective on the film career of the tragically departed David Lynch, on top of the 4 paranormal videos. So there's that if you really care that much. For now, I'll be taking a look at some demos for February's Steam Next Fest, and obviously by it no longer being February by a week or so, and that some of these were from before or after this Next Fest, you get a sense of the cool, casual atmosphere I'm trying to cultivate here. It's chill. We're just hanging out, vibing. Take your shoes off. Now put them back on, just to check in on how the last few rounds are doing and update you on any movements or releases, with the assumption that all others are blocked up in the pipes. I don't like the metaphor that's happening here. Rose Cottage, the spooky haunted house point-and-click adventure game, has been spotted once again. A full-body apparition looming in the doorframe, to the relief of many. As the developer mentioned in the comments of the previous Next Fest video, the game is back on track after a hiatus, and its Steam page has been restored, and so too has my anticipation. Butcher's Creek, the grimy first-person horror action game from David Zemansky, is out to overwhelmingly positive reviews. And same story with the tactical stealth RPG The Stone of Madness and the Technicolor survival horror game Sorry We're Closed. 3 piping hot video game injections to catapult you into another world for the most beautiful and fleeting of moments. New Arcline, the Arcanum-like diesel punk CRPG, is out in early access if you're the impatient type, if you feel like doing some QR testing in your spare time. The first game I took a look at is called I Nima. So you can probably guess by the palindrome title, it's an upcoming psychological horror game from certainly one of the more unique and genre-fluid titles I came across, incorporating some genres I don't usually find myself seeking out, but its very creepy premise and slick art style won me over. Somewhere between a point-and-click puzzle game and a visual novel, where you control the brain of the titular Nima, though the title does question whether or not you are Neyyah, so I guess you'll have to wait for the full release to find that out. The vague premise is that you're a young girl that is being kept restrained in a basement by your mother and questioned, tested by her following an accident. I was fascinated trying to intuit any of what was going on here, because clearly it's not good. Clearly, however this story shakes out, it's something really dark. I failed to think of a scenario where it's good that a parent is doing this, aside from trying to deprogram a League of Legends player, but it's good at withholding, a quick, easier answer. As you talk to your mother and investigate areas, words will start popping up in your brain, many of which can be combined to manually form ideas that you can then ask about and slowly chip away at recovering the memories of this person you once were. But something tells me it won't be that simple. There seems to be this other impulsive voice inside you, a violent one that makes me think I don't fully understand the power dynamic between these two. Am I locked in here with her, or is she locked in here with me? Baptiste is an upcoming first-person psychological horror game from Digital Dreams TM. This was one of the shorter demos, and a large part of my wanting to showcase it here was on the off chance that anyone else has as strong an affinity as I do for dolls in horror media. It's just like a hack for me, and this includes puppets, marionettes, and the occasional stuffed animal. Just as long as it's a completely unthreatening, benign thing made menacing, I'm on board. As soon as I saw this doll, I was just like, oh, I'm gonna like this. There's no reason someone should create such a doll. Only a madman would commit this visage to wood, but therein lies the beauty. Throw in a family trying to recover from a traumatic death, and it's just the right flavor of schlock for me. On move-in day at their new home, these two find this doll encased in glass, and it's apparently in the paperwork for the purchase that they are not allowed to remove the doll. There's like a clause in their lease or something that's like, as long as you're here, that doll needs to be there. And they of course immediately remove the doll, and presumably the rest of the game will be enduring the consequences of that, as well as some other elements running throughout, like learning about the home's previous occupants and whatnot. It's, as far as I could tell, not squandering the material and actually trying to cultivate a fun, creepy atmosphere where I'm smiling and I'm shivering in equal measure.
Who are you? Mom! Mom? Where'd she go?
Ah, yes. The way I leave the function.
Completely with the intention of a compliment. It's like an episode of A Haunting, which is like my comfort show. And in that, nobody ever says, Mom, there was a strange woman who vanished when I looked away and looked back. No. It's always, this place is weird.
Ah, you'll get used to it.
Mom, you're not listening to me.
What is it then? Tell me in detail.
It's just, I don't know. Don't you think it's weird? This place?
No!
Anyway, I think this one might be fun. The Drifter is an upcoming point-and-click adventure game from Powerhoof, and not to play favorites here, but may be my favorite demo I played this Next Fest. My first love was the point-and-click adventure. That was my entryway to gaming, and god damn if it won't be my exit. I don't know what that means. Gonna point a mouse to my head, and... While The Drifter walks and talks like a classic Sierra-style adventure game, it's got this reinvigorated pacing, like you slammed a dose of adrenaline into its corpse and it shot up, describing its escape from death's embrace in a pulpy noir monologue. It follows a drifter named Mick, who is forced to put his nomadic lifestyle on pause and return home for a funeral, but things quickly escalate after he witnesses a murder at the hands of some begoggled frogmen. According to the page, its plot is meant to draw influence from Stephen King and Michael Crichton stories, but we don't get the clearest look at how this world works or what its vibe is, but there are notes of conspiracy thriller and maybe some sort of soft supernatural element with Mick's ability to cheat death. I don't know if you can hear that, but I now share a wall with a washing machine, so intermittently you may hear the sound of pissing. But the important thing is how it treats its item-based puzzles. It's almost comically grounded. Despite there being a murder that just happened and some shadowy organization attempting to cover it up, you still spend most of the length of the demo trying to get a busted car's motor to turn over so you can charge your phone. While there is humor to be found, it doesn't feel like a terminally funny game, especially with its fantastically straight-faced voice acting from the lead, who comes off like an Australian Max Payne, but I can see that easily looping around to funny many times over. I will say there was an exchange with a reporter character that wanted the scoop on the homeless lifestyle, and she flashes a really big knife to show that she's protected, and perhaps it's the American in me, searching for the lowest hanging fruit, but two Australians talking about knives had me on the edge of my seat. Very cool to see a project that doesn't want to treat the genre and the look of these games as simply cute and nostalgic, but is making steps to make them more accessible and consistently engaging. If it carries on like this, I don't foresee myself wandering back and forth pixel hunting for several items that I need to fashion a novelty disguise out of. I think if we're making this type of game now, that would just come off as patronizing, a little degrading even. Hypogea is an upcoming short-form third-person adventure platformer from Charlie Wagner. Always weird when the developer is just someone's name. Yeah, Charlie made this. With a wordless script and visuals culled from the consoles of the mid-aughts, this game follows an automaton raised from ruin seemingly by accident when a similar robot drops a battery. It takes a walking staff in hand and attempts to make its way out of a sprawling concrete megastructure, sometimes finding other functions robots, but usually just walking over their rusted remains. Some of them carry hazy memories of a time before everything looked the way it looks, that is to say, dead. It's a simple premise and honestly doesn't need a whole lot more than that. Things that explore robots through some kind of sentimental lens don't have to work as hard to prove themselves to me.
What's this guy? What's this guy's mission? A gift. He's given me a gift. That means he needs a name. Would you like that? Would you like to have a name? Why do they always leave?
Seeing as platforming is the game's main attraction, I will say it is quite satisfying. From a game feel sense to a design sense, your staff has a lot of utility, from pole vaulting with it, to standing on it, to threading it through wheels to turn them. I like that it's considered in almost every action you take, and none of it feels floaty or awkward. Even with a cold and stark environment, it was still a joy to traverse and explore it, and pick up artifacts of some long-gone, fabled humanity. It's kind of like Wall-E with parkour, which I think I mean as a compliment. Wall-E's in the Criterion Collection. I don't conjure its name lightly. Matchstick Cosmic Flame is an upcoming first-person cosmic horror puzzler adventure game from another one-person dev team named Technomyth. During a trip down an isolated road, a man pulls his car over to take in the beauty of the northern lights, only to then watch his car and the family inside get zapped out of existence, blasted, turned into steamed hams, leaving behind only a wormhole through time and space that he promptly dives into. The first of many you'll be launching yourself into, with less consideration for its destination than a Silent Hill protagonist. In a world that is seemingly torn apart by some otherworldly force, you wander through a dreamy logic to find your family, which includes some puzzles, some combat, and a touch of stealth. It is kind of a stretch to call your game survival horror at all if you don't have that classic pipe with the valve at the end of it. Just nature's greatest weapon, bestowed upon us from on high. The atheist's nightmare. A lot of small indie games these days work to capture the aesthetic of the 5th console generation, and while this game seems to have that same goal in mind, it's also doing a lot that was impossible at the time, in part because of its very distinguished art style.
Whoa. Check this out, it's like a Death Grips album cover.
It's dark, dreary, and populated by gas lamps offering dramatic sanctuaries of light. There's a faint fog writhing around every surface, and weird black holes and solar flares pulsating in the sky. It's quite eye-catching. The demo seems very deliberate in what it shows of the gameplay, so I don't know if there will be more of a loop with closed-off spaces, or if it will continue like this and kind of hop around genre based on set piece. Either way, never fails to impress me what just one person can get done. Super imaginative and just going in whatever direction it wants to. I was particularly amused by a sequence where you need to collect this bag to give to a Mothman, but it's stuck in the mouth of some kind of wall phantom that seems really threatening, but you just kind of bonk it on the nose like a rolled up newspaper and a dog that's just eaten your Morrowind map. Moroi is an upcoming isometric dark comedy action adventure game from Violet Saint. A lot of first-timers on this video, so I guess that means a new generation is taking hold, shoving me out, alienating me, but perhaps it is them who is truly out of touch. This wildly inventive and weird little game is set in a sort of personalized hell for our protagonist, named the Cosmic Engine. He's here to be a prisoner, tormented for all eternity, but he understandably doesn't want to just sit there and take it, so he attempts to escape and reckon with whatever circumstances led him to be there. The game's morbid sense of humor shines through a variety of creepy or off-putting characters that you need to deal with in order to puzzle your way out of the first sort of panopticon. These include a sentient meat grinder, a cannibal that wants to go out doing what he loves, and a wizard named Edgar who is seemingly only posing as a prisoner to get you to kill one of the other characters. I was just routinely impressed by the thought that went into every square inch of this somewhat small demo. It's lousy with creative and macabre ideas that are rendered, slickly. And this guy didn't hurt none either. Given that it takes place in a sort of mental prison, there isn't much of a time and place you can nail down. It's kind of medieval, kind of turn of the century, but then you get a minigun. Combat is fun enough. It feels very impactful and frantic sometimes, and every now and then you get to perform a flashy finishing move. Excessively gory to amusing effect. Kind of like if the old point-and-click game Sanitarium erupted into Doom 2016 gameplay.
Is this where Laura Palmer and the arm hung out before they got the tile in? Now I know why they call it the Red Room.
The second half of the demo completely breaks form and becomes this maudlin, cautionary folktale in which a little doll boy gives himself away piece by piece to help others with increasingly diminished return. Which I don't know if that was like a pre-existing fable or it was cooked up for this game, but it's like a reverse Giving Tree scenario. Neyyah is an upcoming sci-fi point-and-click adventure game from Defy Reality Entertainment and publisher Microprose, who I honestly did not know still existed. But it seems hugely appropriate that this nostalgic name would be publishing this nostalgic passion project that serves to revive the look and feel of Cyan's early output like Myst and Riven. I'm sure I mentioned in a video I did for Myst that's too old and you shouldn't watch it, but I think it may have been the first game that I ever touched. I can never really remember if it was that or Wolfenstein 3D, but it was one of those two. So I say with some meaningless measure of confidence that these gamers fucking nailed it. This feels like a project lifted from a swamp and restored decades later. Beautiful pre-rendered environments, charming live-action sequences, and every surface reflecting Myst's tendency to have multiple alien cultures clashing. There's like a terrestrial world that is a little foreign, but lush and full of weird little critters, and then this layer is set atop that by explorers or colonizers who love retro-futuristic sci-fi machinery. Portals and tram systems that operate with big clunky levers and wheels. I don't yet have a firm grasp on the plot details. You play as a character that accidentally gets sent through a portal to a place called Ulejai, and a man tells you that your arrival was prophesized and you are destined to at least attempt to change the fate of this world. I think they are intentionally trying to overload you with jargon and fantasy names of people and places and things, and the process of working out what the Quilivian is or who Smolax is, will come together with time. Fittingly, given its inspiration, you're a fish out of water that's given a brief blurb about where you are, what things are, so you'll have plenty of time to think.
What the hell? Well, maybe if I press it again. Huh?
But the prospect of a whole game of this is really exciting. It takes you back to a caveman-like primal place, and then someone hands you a smartphone, and you're like, okay, so I guess I'll try to eat this, because that's what you do with most things, right? I found that even when I came to the barriers of the demo, I was hit with a pang of disappointment, because it does have this explorative joy that I've not felt stimulated in a long time. So everything down to the fonts was really getting me where I needed to go. Why did I write this like this? Me from a few days ago and me today are like two different guys. Radiolight is an upcoming first-person horror mystery game from solo developer Christoph Nessel. It takes place in the 1980s and in the midst of a search for a missing Boy Scout. The protagonist, a small-town cop, is brought in when a park ranger looking for the child goes missing as well. You are the third cat sent into the wall to, look for the previous two. This is a narrative-focused game with some light puzzles and heavy atmosphere. The majority of your time is spent walking through an effectively eerie forest while cradling your walkie-talkie and emotionally relying on its connection to a park ranger back in civilization. Further, there is an emphasis on radio as a tool because you can also tune one to different stations and hear news or emergency updates or the demons. Oh, hang on, did you say demons? I sure did, me. Tell me more about that. No. It's paced really well and slowly drip feeds you clues about multiple mysteries that start mundane but get increasingly threatening, and I'm really interested to see if the full game picks up right after this or starts earlier, because it exits at a real height of strangeness. I'm hooked. I'm ready to be reeled in, stuffed, mounted. So I think particularly for a solo dev, this is a very solid demo for a promising game, and it's pulling off a lot of subtle, hard to accomplish stuff. I just want to make that clear because obviously it will have a tough time escaping comparisons to the 2016 game Firewatch, due to just the premise of two characters developing a camaraderie over a radio while exploring a stylized mystery forest. For sure, that's a thing that's happening, and that's okay. In fact, for me, I think it's great. My experience with Firewatch was that I think it's a brilliant gameplay premise, and about 2/3 of that game are really effectively making use of the premise, and I was memorably engaged in it. And then the ending happens, which I found to be so profoundly disappointing that it evaporated all my excitement and wonder, and all I was left with was the skeleton, the bones of how it worked, and this fleeting dream that someone would pick up this idea and do something with it. Like literally anything. And thankfully, a few have, and this one mercifully shows a clear, immediate willingness to indulge in some kind of supernatural or psychological element, and that's exciting.
You know, now that I have this axe, I feel kind of fearless in it. Huh.
What the hell?
Then Slender shows up and changes things. Slender? I barely know her. Just laugh through it.
But this is just a hyper-specific selling point for me. I don't want to sell the game to you as a Firewatch-like, because it's got its own ideas and its own tone that will clearly differentiate it. It's a little more rough around the edges, but like barely noticeably. It's actually doing a not half bad job with characterizing the two lead voices and making them feel distinct. I mean, ultimately, this is the biggest hurdle I'd imagine, because the whole thing centers around these two talking nearly non-stop. So if that's not working, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly. But I didn't skip a single opportunity to listen to them chat and exchange unnerved remarks about overturned chairs. Scarlet Lake is an upcoming isometric survival horror game from Nocturnal Interactive. While it could be said that I'm a sucker for a retro-inspired survival horror project, a lot of these, I find, are trying to do too much, trying to reinvent the wheel, and often what clicks for me is more so a feeling that the developer understands the genre and its strengths. They know what to keep in some sense, and I think this project is an example of the latter. It's a competently crafted love letter to the greats with its own lo-fi art style. That reminds me much more of like a Game Boy Advance game. Like just out of the corner of my eye, it reminded me of the Sims spin-off, The Herbs, but it's obviously a lot prettier and slightly more violent. The Herbs was sorely lacking this game's ragdoll physics and destructible limbs. Actually, now that I'm staring at it again, it kind of reminds me of Signalis on occasion. Just set in a little remote town, and I can see it better on account of my eyes not leaking while I look at it or think about it. It's so far pretty light on plot, but there is certainly one happening. You play as a wife guy. He's got one, but she's missing. Ain't that always how it goes? And she's relayed a message to him that he's gotta come to Scarlet Lake, where all its citizens are transforming into horrid mutants. After our ride is murdered by some commando types, we run off to engage in some classic item-based puzzles, limited inventory management, and shootouts, and hopefully get to the bottom of this disaster and learn something about our suspiciously capable protagonist, and hopefully, God willing, find that wife. Or not. I'm open to other things if you had something better in mind. Skin Deep is an upcoming, lighthearted sci-fi immersive sim from Blendo Games that follows a woman named Neyyah Pasadena, who is unfrozen aboard a spaceship piloted by cats and currently under siege by pirates. The demo lets you play through 2 missions that function like little self-contained puzzle rooms, but based on the press material, the full game is meant to be a non-linear sandbox. Even this brief look at the game makes clear its goofy sense of humor and abundance of quirky mechanics. There is very little in this game that isn't absurd and silly, but in a non-grating and creative way. It faintly resembles other immersive sims, but its distinct voice and cartoon logic drowns that out. There's a part where you need to move across the exterior of the ship to a different section, and they acknowledge that there are oxygen tanks one could take to do that, but Neyyah doesn't need that because she has a 3rd lung, so that settles that. I like that taking down pirates is like a multi-step process. For starters, you have to stun them either by making them slip on a soapy surface or by throwing an incendiary pepper box that sends them into a sneezing fit, and you can take the opportunity to leap on their back and sort of ride them into whatever surface you can find to ram their head into. And then because these pirates have undergone a procedure in which their heads operate independently from their person like Futurama, and thus could be retrieved and put on a new body, you have to find some way of getting the head off the ship. So like throwing it in a pneumatic trash chute or flushing it down a toilet. While you're looking around for some place to toss it, it's just staring at you, calling you a dickhead.
I'm gonna kick your butt.
Yeah, tell your story to the piss.
Make no mistake, I'm not really a funny game kind of gamer. I played quite a few of these demos, and some would immediately start in with the yucks, and I'd think, hey, we got a fucking comedian over here. Hey, here's a joke for you. Knock knock. Uninstall. But thankfully, I think this game is focusing on situational sci-fi stuff for humor, and it's not just overly quippy, lol, that just happened kind of stuff. I would be very interested to see how it handles a full 12-hour or so game. Because if it keeps up this pacing and moment-to-moment fun, then it might result in a great title that lives up to the rarely correctly used immersive sim tag on Steam. But just glancing at it now, apparently Power Wash Simulator Wallace and Gromit crossover DLC is an immersive sim, and Disney Dreamlight Valley is apparently an immersive sim. This fucking baby game? Oh, you guys can't see that, right?
I think it's got like a computer glitch.
A lot of Lovecraft in this roundup. Static Dread is an upcoming Lovecraftian horror simulation from Solar Suit Games. This was one of the longer demos, and I was relieved that it was because you need a bit of time to feel out its challenge and how that will gradually escalate. The Steam listing seems to give it the subtitle 15 Days at the Old Lighthouse, which does sound more imposing than a paltry 5 nights at some other fright-inducing locations. And like that game that I didn't name, this one gives you a new job in a scary location where you have to spin a bunch of plates to stay alive and not get fired. It's using that same horror simulation format as a springboard and includes a number of different mechanics and influences like Papers, Please. There's resources to manage and characters to interact with. Curiously, the time and place the game occupies looks and feels like the familiar 1920s East Coast harbor town you'd expect from a Lovecraft story, but it's easy to forget that it's supposed to take place in modern day, following some kind of cataclysmic event that requires the resurrection of old infrastructure like lighthouses. That's where you come in. So it's functionally a classic Lovecraft world, but some of the technology is anachronistic, and every once in a while they will reference something modern like the COVID pandemic. Very, very weird, but interesting choice. Anyways, your job is to sit at a desk and listen for approaching ships, contact their captain over the radio, and fax them directions to whichever port they're headed to. Meanwhile, shadowy figures outside the lighthouse seem to creep closer and closer and start fucking with you, and characters start visiting you and pulling you into side plots that push you to bend the rules of your job. Also, you have to stay fed and caffeinated, lest you pass out before your shift is done. With each day, there are new things to consider and ways that protocol changes. At one point, there is an influx of ships reporting weird anomalies at sea, like strange fishy aberrations or glowing orbs, and so you have to question the ship captains more and make sure they aren't just regular crazy, so you have to get them to send you a pic of the thing and then you can direct them to a research outpost. And meanwhile, there's a new drug hitting the streets, forcing you to keep an eye out for the smugglers and defer them to the authorities. And if you fuck up any of these directions, you're docked part of your pay, which you need to buy fish and other assorted upgrades to your office. I think I pretty consistently felt like I was failing, and I'm not sure if that was by design. It's actually pretty impressive how it consistently puts you in these awful conundrums, especially when some eldritch horror starts bargaining with you, asking you to feed it 1 or 2 ships, and in return it'll spare everyone else. But then sometimes there are like assholes that you want to feed to them, but I quickly learned that this demon guy, he's not reliable. He's a bit mercurial, I'd say. Unpredictable like. Even though so much of what the game is doing is trying to stress you out. You know, you got all these instructions to remember. The old man outside keeps wanting to hang out in the lighthouse, but you told your boss you wouldn't let anyone in. But I'm pretty sure I sent his son to a watery grave, so I might as well.
I don't have time to address this. I'm busy.
And I'm just pounding fish into my person. But it never felt frustrating or insurmountable. I never reached like a fail state or anything. I just may have caused many others to reach a fail state. Stygian, Outer Gods, is an upcoming Lovecraftian first-person survival horror game with RPG elements from developer Mysterial Games and publisher Fulcrum Publishing. And in this very promising but very brief demo, we get a look at some solid game mechanics coming together. Some crafting, some combat, some stealth. There's a card-based ability system. And even though the plot details are kept vague, I get a sense that it has a firm hold of the Lovecraft mythos, told through a slightly pulpy lens. In so many words, this looks like it's shaping up to be a rock-solid horror game with a cool art style that reminds me of BioShock, where it's a little cartoony, but plenty dirty and decayed as well. But to address the elephant that may be visible to some, touched with a certain forbidden knowledge, this game is actually a prequel to a game from 2019 called Stygian Reign of the Old Ones, a tactical CRPG by a different developer named Cultic Games, and this project will be set before the Black Day, a reality-bending apocalyptic event. I did a video on that game around its release, I think, and it's one of few games that I feel like I was compelled to be harshly critical of because it was unfinished. finished and not disclosed as being so. And I don't ordinarily like to cover games that I know I'll be critical of, but because I thought it showed so much promise, I just kind of wanted to, like, you know, light a fire under it. I wanted to see it be the best game it could be. It had this wonderful first act, and then it quite literally falls apart. Much like, I don't mean to be Gromit brain today, but like, you know, when Gromit is laying down track as he's barreling down it, that team has since made various apologies in Steam community posts about simply being unable to finish it due to lack of resources. But by gauging the reaction to these, and including my own feelings, I think it would be safe to say that it doesn't do a lot to dissuade the confusion and disappointment in the project. It's a disappointment that stemmed from how promising the game was. It stands as one of the more inventive and fresh takes on the Lovecraft mythos that genuinely reignited my interest in the material. So to see it shelved for some boring bureaucratic reason the consumer can never truly comprehend is a bit of a bummer. I'm apprehensively interested in another studio exploring the world and characters of Stygian, and in this brief look alone there was some memories unlocked of certain characters and places. So going against the usual purpose of these videos, i.e. to spotlight cool projects, I'm assigning a secondary reason for doing so, which is, I guess, to keep a tab on it. I'm observing from a distance with charitability. Hey, it could be good. At the end of the day, I want games to be good. I would absolutely love for this to be a worthwhile endeavor. And it is sort of starting from zero with the franchise because it's an unproven developer making a new game that's not even in the same genre. It's like if you went to a restaurant and you were handed a burrito and it turned out to be burnt and you're like, oh man, this burrito's burnt. And then a different guy comes in and hands you an Italian sub and you're like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this now. I mean, I do also like these. Twisted Tower is an upcoming first-person shooter adventure game from Atmos Games. It puts you in the role of a man named Tiny, who has just come home from war in the 1940s to find that his fiancée has left him for another man. Depressed and not sure what to do with himself, he receives a golden ticket to go to Twisted Tower, and so he's like, alright, I'm not doing anything. Come to find out, this sprawling amusement park resort is some kind of murder gauntlet that our hero must endure in order to win the prize. The prize being his would-be wife. So with the hammer and captive paramour, there is sort of a classic Mario story beating underneath this. I don't know if the full game's plot is going to be that truncated, but it works well enough. And I do like that we get a chatty protagonist. He frequently chimes in and reminds us that he's a character. He's got stuff going on. Maybe it's the title or the thumbnail, but I sort of blind installed the demo, assuming it to be some kind of goofy Unreal asset flip where you bonk the same clown with a mallet over and over. But I was immediately taken aback at how competently constructed a game it is and how confident and clear its vision is. It's a game that knows exactly what it wants to be, and that starts at BioShock. The influence of that game is felt pretty immediately, from the UI to the art style and some mechanics, but it's also consistently doing a lot to differentiate from that game. I can see how it's an easy leap to make because BioShock's Rapture has a lot of exhibits and history lessons, and it's mapped out like a Disney-esque city of the future, so why not just go all in on that feeling, but keep the parts where you blast guys, and there sure is a lot of that. The combat is aiming for more of a classic arena-style run-and-gun experience. There's a big emphasis on moving, jumping on bouncy things, or shooting a hook to fly across the room. In between fights, there are neutral areas where you can upgrade your weapons, or get snacks and chat with some NPCs. It's more video gamey and tongue-in-cheek. Even though the main loop here is not something I typically seek out, the combat feels really satisfying. Nobody just kind of falls down after being shot, rather they erupt in a mix of arterial spray and confetti. But also, it being so inventive and harkening back to the AAA titles of 2007 is doing a lot for me. I've long said that game development should have stagnated and froze in the late aughts because why pretend like there was anywhere worth going after? It's like we're all pretending we didn't peak. And finally, there's a game that recognizes that. Well, that's all for now. If any of these interest you, you should probably go and wishlist them or purchase them when they come out, or just give these folks some money in a way that circumvents Steam's shitty revenue split. All right, I'll get back to work now. This was my free period. I'll see you soon. Remain gaming until further notice.
What?